The German Shepherd lay motionless beneath the old oak tree, each shallow breath a struggle against the inevitable. His military training had taught him never to show weakness, never to surrender, never to beg. But training meant nothing now, not when his ribs pressed sharp against matted fur, not when his legs trembled with exhaustion, not when 3 weeks of searching had brought him here, to this quiet street where he could go no further. Through dimming eyes, he saw her. A small girl with a pink backpack, no more than 6 years old, walking home from the bus stop. Every instinct screamed at him to maintain dignity, to die as soldiers should, silent and proud. But then he thought of James. The dog's front legs folded slowly, painfully. His massive head lowered until his muzzle nearly touched the ground. And for the first time in 8 years of military service, Sergeant broke his final command. He begged. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Emma Rodriguez had wanted a dog for as long as she could remember. Her bedroom walls were covered with posters of golden retrievers and Labrador puppies, her bookshelf lined with stories about Lassie and Old Yeller. Every birthday wish, every Christmas list, every shooting star, all dedicated to the same dream. But the answer was always the same. We can't afford a pet right now, sweetie. At 6 years old, Emma understood what "can't afford" meant. She saw how her mother, Maria, worked double shifts at County Hospital, how her father, David, stayed late at the insurance office, how they whispered about bills at the kitchen table when they thought she was asleep. She was an only child in a modest 2-story house in Marietta, Georgia, where the lawns were well kept and the neighbors smiled, but nobody talked much about money troubles. Still, Emma dreamed. She checked out library books about dog breeds, memorizing facts about German Shepherds, loyal, intelligent, protective. She drew pictures of herself walking a big dog through the park. She even saved her allowance in a jar labeled Dog Fund, though it only held $17.32. This Friday afternoon in late August was like any other. School had started 2 weeks ago, first grade bringing new challenges with reading and math. The Georgia sun hung low and golden as Emma walked home from the bus stop, her pink backpack covered in animal stickers she'd collected, bouncing with each step. The route was familiar and safe. Just 3 blocks through tree-lined streets, her parents trusted her to walk alone. She was thinking about her spelling homework when she noticed something unusual under the massive oak tree near the corner of Magnolia Street. At first, she thought it might be a shadow or a pile of old blankets someone had left, but as she got closer, her heart began to race. It was a dog, a huge dog with black and tan fur that looked matted and dirty. He wasn't moving. Emma's parents had taught her to be careful around strange animals, especially big ones. But something about this dog made her pause rather than run. He looked sick, really sick. She could see his ribs through his fur, and there was something wrong with the way he was lying there, so still. Taking small, careful steps, Emma approached. Her grandmother had always said she had a gift with animals, that they could sense her gentle spirit. Emma hoped that was true now. "Hello?" she called softly, stopping about 5 feet away. "Are you okay, puppy?" The dog's eyes remained closed. For a terrible moment, Emma thought he might be dead. Then she saw it, the faint rise and fall of his chest, the slight twitch of an ear. He was alive. Barely. Emma knelt down slowly, her small hand reaching toward the dog's head. She could see now that beneath the dirt and tangles his fur was beautiful. Thick black saddle markings over a tan coat, the distinctive coloring of a German Shepherd. Up close she noticed other things too. A silver tag hanging from a worn collar, a long scar running down his left thigh, and eyes that suddenly opened to reveal a deep, intelligent brown. Those eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made Emma catch her breath. This wasn't a pet someone had carelessly lost. This was a dog who had seen things, done things, suffered things beyond what any animal should endure. The German shepherd's gaze held hers for a long moment, and Emma could have sworn she saw him thinking, weighing his options, making some kind of decision. His body trembled with the effort as his front legs began to move. Emma watched in confusion as he slowly, painfully repositioned himself. His front legs folded beneath him in a deliberate motion, his massive head lowered until his muzzle nearly touched the grass, his ears flattened back against his skull. And then he looked up at her again, his head tilted upward in a posture of complete submission. Emma's eyes widened. She had read enough books about dogs to recognize what she was seeing. This proud, powerful animal, a dog who looked like he could protect an entire family, was bowing to her, begging her for help. "Oh," Emma whispered, her voice breaking as tears spilled down her cheeks. "Oh, you poor thing." She moved closer, no longer afraid, and gently touched the top of his head. The dog didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned ever so slightly into her touch, as if that small gesture of kindness was the first he'd received in a very long time. "Don't worry," Emma said, stroking the matted fur between his ears. "I'm going to help you. I promise." The dog's tail gave one weak thump against the ground, as if he understood and believed her. Emma's mind raced. The dog was too big for her to carry. He had to weigh at least 70 pounds, maybe more. She needed her parents, but she couldn't leave him here alone. What if he tried to follow her and collapsed? What if someone called animal control and took him away before she got back? She looked into his eyes again. "I have to get my mom and dad. But I'll come right back, I promise. Can you stay here? Please stay." The dog's eyes followed her as she stood up, and Emma saw something in them that broke her heart. Doubt. He'd been left before. He knew what it meant when humans walked away. "I'm coming back," she said firmly, backing away slowly. "I promise. Just wait for me." Then she turned and ran, her backpack thumping against her spine as her feet pounded the sidewalk. Her house was only 100 yards away, but it felt like miles. She burst through the front door, breathless and crying. "Mom! Dad!" she shouted. "There's a dog! He needs help!" Maria appeared from the kitchen, dish towel in hand, her nurse's instincts immediately activated by her daughter's distress. "Emma, what's wrong? Are you hurt?" "No, but there's a dog under the oak tree, and he's really sick, and he bowed to me, and I promised I'd help him." The words tumbled out in a rush. David emerged from his home office, removing his reading glasses. "Slow down, sweetie. What dog?" "A German shepherd. A big one. He's hurt and skinny, and he needs us." Maria and David exchanged the look that parents share when their child is being dramatic. "Emma," Maria said gently, "we've talked about this. We can't just—" "Mom, please!" Emma grabbed her mother's hand, pulling toward the door. "Just come, look, please. I made a promise." There was something in her daughter's voice, an urgency, a certainty, that made Maria pause. She looked at David, who shrugged and followed as Emma dragged them both outside. They walked quickly back to the oak tree, Emma leading the way. As they rounded the corner, she pointed, "There, see?" The German shepherd was exactly where she'd left him, still in that heartbreaking, submissive posture, as if he'd used the last of his strength to hold the position and wait for the little girl who had promised to return. David stopped short. "That's not a stray dog, Emma. That's a trained dog. Look at the way he's positioned." Maria's nurse's eyes swept over the animal, cataloging injuries. "He's severely malnourished, dehydrated, and that's not a regular collar. That's a military tag." Emma looked up at her parents, tears streaming down her face. "Can we help him? Please, I promised." David crouched down slowly, speaking in the calm voice he used when Emma had nightmares. "Easy, boy. We're not going to hurt you." The German shepherd's eyes tracked David's movement, wary but not aggressive. Years of training kept him still, kept him waiting for a command that might never come. "Maria, look at that scar on his leg," David said quietly. "That's not from a dog fight. That's surgical." Maria knelt beside her husband, her professional assessment continuing. "Shrapnel wound, if I had to guess. This dog has seen combat." She reached slowly toward the silver tag dangling from the collar, and the dog allowed her to turn it toward the light. "SGT K9 Unit 437, she read aloud. "James Mitchell." Below that was a serial number and a phone number that had been partially scratched away by time and wear. "A military working dog," David said softly, reverence in his voice. His own father had served in Vietnam, and he'd grown up with stories of the dogs who saved countless soldiers' lives. How did he end up here? Emma, who had been standing back as instructed, couldn't contain herself any longer. "Can we help him now? He's been waiting and he's really sick." Maria looked at David, and in that glance passed an entire conversation about money they didn't have, about a daughter who had been asking for a dog for years, about the right thing to do versus the practical thing to do. "We need to get him to a vet," Maria finally said. "At minimum, he needs fluids and an examination. That's going to cost several $100s, David." "I know." David ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Emma recognized as his worried, thinking face. "But we can't just leave him here." "I have $17 saved," Emma offered desperately. "In my dog fund jar!" Despite the gravity of the situation, both parents felt their hearts squeeze at their daughter's earnestness. "Emma, honey, that's very generous, but this is going to cost more than that." Maria stood up, making her decision. "David, help me get him to the car. We'll take him home, get some water and food in him, and figure out the next steps." "What about finding his owner?" "This James Mitchell?" David asked. "Phone number's too worn to read completely. We'll have to try other ways. But first, this dog needs immediate help." Getting Sergeant to his feet proved challenging. He wanted to obey, wanted to stand, but his legs had been pushed beyond their limit. David finally had to support most of the dog's weight, with Maria on the other side and Emma hovering anxiously nearby. "He must weigh 75 pounds, David grunted, "but he should probably weigh closer to 90. The walk to the Rodriguez house was slow and painful. Neighbors emerged from houses, curious about the procession. Mrs. Chen from next door called out, "Is that dog dangerous?" "He's hurt," Emma called back firmly. "We're helping him." In the living room, the German Shepherd collapsed onto the carpet with a heavy exhale. Emma wanted to sit beside him immediately, but Maria held her back. "Let me check him first, baby. I need to make sure it's safe." Maria performed a thorough examination while the dog lay passive, too exhausted to resist. "No open wounds, thank God. The scar is old, fully healed. His gums are pale, definitely dehydrated. Ribs are prominent. Hip might be arthritic, and he's absolutely exhausted." She looked up at David. "We need to get fluids in him right away. I'll call Dr. Morrison. She might see him after hours as a favor." "Maria, the cost?" "I know. But what's the alternative? Call animal control? They're overcrowded." "A senior military dog in this condition?" She didn't finish the sentence, but they all knew what she meant. Emma, who had been listening to every word, spoke up. "You always tell me that doing the right thing isn't always easy. You said that actions matter more than words." Her parents stared at their 6-year-old daughter, who was using their own teachings against them. David sighed, a small smile tugging at his lips despite everything. "She's got us there." "Fine," Maria said. But her voice was warm. "We keep him tonight. Get him stabilized. Tomorrow morning we take him to the shelter. They have resources we don't. They can find his owner or place him with someone who can afford his care." Emma's face fell. "But Mom," "Emma, this is not a negotiation. One night. That's the deal." Maria's tone was firm, but she gently touched her daughter's cheek. "I know you want to keep him, sweetheart, but we have to be realistic." Can I at least bring him some water? Maria nodded. Slowly, not too much at once or he'll get sick, and he stays in the laundry room tonight. I don't want him on the furniture or in your bed. Emma nodded eagerly and ran to the kitchen. She filled a large bowl with cool water and carried it carefully back to the living room. The German shepherd's ears perked up at the sound of sloshing water. She set it down in front of him, and he drank deeply, desperately, water spilling from the sides of his muzzle. Not too fast, boy, David cautioned, pulling the bowl back after a minute. You'll make yourself sick. We'll give you more in a bit. The dog's eyes found Emma's again, and in them she saw something that made her chest ache. Gratitude, and underneath it, a terrible sadness that she was too young to fully understand, but old enough to feel. Emma was supposed to be sleeping in her own bed. Her mother had been very clear about that. But at midnight she found herself lying awake, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling, thinking about the German shepherd alone in the laundry room. She'd heard her parents talking in low voices after they thought she'd gone to bed. Her father's voice, worried about money. The water heater's making that noise again, and Emma needs new shoes for school. Her mother's voice, tired but gentle. I know, but we'll figure it out. We always do. Emma slipped out of bed, grabbed her pillow and the blanket from the foot of her bed and tiptoed down the stairs. The house was dark except for the nightlight in the hallway. She could hear her father's soft snoring from her parents' bedroom, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the old clock in the living room. The laundry room door was closed, but not latched. Emma pushed it open slowly, wincing when it creaked. The German shepherd was awake, lying on the pile of old towels her mother had arranged for him. His head lifted as Emma entered, ears forward, alert despite his exhaustion. Hi, Emma whispered. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about you being down here all alone. She sat down on the floor beside him, spreading her blanket over her legs. The dog watched her carefully, and she could see him processing, deciding whether this was allowed. My mom says we have to take you to the shelter tomorrow, Emma continued softly, as if he could understand every word. She says they have resources and they can find your owner or find you a new home. But I don't want you to go. I know that's selfish, but I've wanted a dog my whole life, and you're the bravest dog I ever met. The German shepherd's tail moved slightly, just the tip twitching against the floor. Emma reached out slowly and touched his head, stroking the soft fur between his ears. I saw you bow to me. My book about dogs says that's called a play bow, but that's not what you were doing. You were asking me to help you, weren't you? Like you were praying. The dog's eyes closed at her gentle touch, and Emma felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't just any dog. This was a person. Well, not a person, but someone who thought and felt and had a whole story she didn't know yet. I wonder where you came from, she whispered. I wonder what happened to James Mitchell. That was the name on your tag. Is he your owner? Did he lose you? Are you looking for him? At the sound of that name, James, the dog's eyes opened. His ears perked forward, and he made a soft sound, half whine, half whimper. James, Emma repeated, and the dog's whole body tensed with recognition. You know that name? He's your person, isn't he? The dog's response was unmistakable. He shifted his body closer to Emma, resting his large head on her small lap. The weight was heavy, but Emma didn't mind. And she stroked his head, feeling the knobs of his skull through the thin skin, the softness of his ears. We'll find him, Emma promised. I don't know how, but we will. And if we can't, I'll make sure you go somewhere good, somewhere safe. I promise. She didn't remember falling asleep, but when Maria found them at 6 a.m, Emma was curled up on the laundry room floor, her head on her pillow, her blanket pulled up to her chin. The German shepherd, was curved around her protectively, his body forming a warm barrier between the child and the door, his head resting near hers, keeping watch even in sleep. Maria stood in the doorway for a long moment, her phone ready to scold her daughter for disobeying. But the words died in her throat. There was something about the scene, the massive military dog protecting the tiny girl, both of them peaceful in a way that seemed almost sacred, that stopped her. She took a photo instead, then gently woke Emma. "Baby," she said softly, touching Emma's shoulder. "Time to wake up." Emma's eyes fluttered open, momentarily confused. Then she remembered and looked at the dog, who was already awake and watching Maria carefully. "I'm sorry, Mama," Emma said quickly. "I know you said to stay in my bed, but I couldn't stop thinking about him being alone and—" "It's okay," Maria interrupted, surprising both herself and her daughter. "But next time you ask first. Deal?" Emma nodded eagerly and sat up. The German Shepherd rose too, slower, his movements stiff from lying on the hard floor. "How's he doing?" Emma asked. Maria knelt down, performing another quick assessment. "Better than last night. He drank the rest of the water, and I'm glad to see he kept it down. His gums have a bit more color. But he still needs professional care." "Are we still taking him to the shelter?" Maria hesitated. That was the plan. That was the sensible, practical plan. But looking at her daughter's hopeful face and the way the dog seemed calmer in Emma's presence, she found herself wavering. "Let's have breakfast first," she said. "Then your father and I need to make some phone calls." Over scrambled eggs and toast, David examined the dog tag more carefully with a magnifying glass he used for insurance paperwork. "The serial number is clear enough, and I can make out part of the phone number. Looks like a 404 area code. That's Atlanta. Can we call it?" Emma asked, barely touching her breakfast. "The last 3 digits are scratched off," David said. "But maybe we can search for James Mitchell, military, German Shepherd, Georgia. Someone has to know something." Maria poured herself a second cup of coffee. "I called Dr. Morrison last night. She said she could see him this afternoon if we bring him in. But David, it's going to be expensive." "How expensive?" "Examination, blood work, X-rays if needed, probably $500 minimum." "Oh, and that's with her giving us a discount." The number hung in the air between them. $500 they didn't have in their budget. $500 that was supposed to go toward fixing the water heater or replacing Emma's worn-out shoes. Emma looked between her parents, understanding dawning. Is that too much? Neither parent answered right away, which was answer enough. "What if—" Emma started, then stopped. "What if what, honey?" David prompted. "What if we found his owner first, before we spend all that money? Maybe his owner could pay for the vet." It was such a practical, adult suggestion coming from a 6-year-old that both Maria and David looked at their daughter with new appreciation. "That's actually a really good idea," David said. "Let me try searching online first. Maria, you said you have contacts at the VA hospital, right? A few nurses who work there?" "I can make some calls." For the next 2 hours, their living room became an investigation center. David searched military databases, news articles, and social media. Maria called colleagues, asking if anyone had heard of a James Mitchell who'd served as a K9 handler. Emma sat with the German Shepherd, reading to him from her book about dog breeds, keeping him calm. Finally, Maria's phone rang. "Hello? Yes, this is Maria Rodriguez. You do? Oh, thank God. Yes, we have his dog. No, the dog is alive. Barely, but alive. We found him yesterday." "What? Are you sure?" Her face changed as she listened, going from hopeful to shocked to something like heartbroken. "Thank you for the information," she said quietly. "Yes, I understand. Yes, we'll figure something out." She hung up and looked at David with tears in her eyes. "What?" David asked. "What did they say?" "They know James Mitchell. He was a patient there 6 months ago. Stage 3 lung cancer." She paused, wiping her eyes. "David, he's homeless. He's been staying at the Marietta Square shelter when there's space. He doesn't have any family except a brother he's estranged from." Emma stood up, her small hand gripping the dog's collar. "Then where's his dog supposed to be? Why isn't he with James?" "I don't know, baby. Maybe he couldn't keep him anymore. Maybe he thought the dog would have a better chance without him." The German Shepherd seemed to understand they were talking about something important. He pressed against Emma's leg and she wrapped her arms around his neck. "We have to find James," Emma said firmly. "This dog came all the way here looking for him. They belong together." David pulled up the address for Marietta Square Shelter on his phone. "It's only 20 minutes away. We could go there this morning." "And what?" Maria asked. "Bring a homeless man with cancer back to his dying dog? What does that solve, David?" "He still can't care for the dog. We still can't afford the vet bills." "I don't know," David admitted. "But Emma's right about one thing. They belong together. Whatever happened to separate them, this dog hasn't given up. He's been searching. Maybe we owe it to both of them to at least try." Maria looked at her husband, then at her daughter, then at the German Shepherd who'd somehow become the center of their world in less than 24 hours. "Fine," she said, though her voice was thick with emotion. "We'll go to the shelter. We'll try to find James Mitchell. But Emma, you need to understand something." Emma looked up at her mother. "Even if we find him, even if he wants his dog back, there are no easy answers here. They're both in trouble. Both of them need help we can't afford to give. Do you understand?" Emma nodded slowly. "But we have to try. You always say trying matters." "Yes," Maria said softly. "Yes, trying matters." They loaded the German Shepherd into their car, David spreading old blankets across the back seat. Emma sat beside him, her hand resting on his head. The dog looked out the window as they drove through Marietta's streets, past the neat suburban houses, past the shopping centers, toward the older part of town where the shelter was located. The Marietta Square shelter occupied a converted church building, its white paint peeling, its sign reading, "All are welcome." The parking lot held a mix of old cars and the occasional newer vehicle belonging to volunteers. Inside, the smell hit them first. Industrial cleaner attempting to mask the odors of too many people living in too small a space. A woman in her 50s looked up from the reception desk, her tired eyes widening as she saw the German Shepherd. "I'm sorry, but we don't allow pets," she started to say. "We're not staying," Maria said quickly. "We're looking for someone, James Mitchell." "We were told he stays here sometimes." The woman's expression changed. "James, yes, he's here. Has been for the past week." She lowered her voice. "Is this about his dog? He asks everyone who comes through if they've seen a German Shepherd." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "This is his dog. We found him." The volunteer's hand went to her mouth. "Oh my God. James he's been beside himself. Won't talk about what happened, but he mentions his dog constantly." She stood up. "Wait here. Let me get him." They waited in the sparse lobby, the German Shepherd sitting perfectly still beside Emma, as if he sensed something important was about to happen. David held Maria's hand. Emma held the dog's collar. And then they heard footsteps, slow, shuffling footsteps, and a man appeared in the doorway. James Mitchell was only 34 years old, but he looked 50s. His frame was gaunt, his clothes hung loosely on him, and his face bore the hollow look of someone who'd stopped hoping for anything good. His hair was military short but unkempt, and his eyes held a distance that spoke of things seen and done that no one should have to carry. But when those eyes landed on the German Shepherd, everything stopped. The world seemed to hold its breath as man and dog stared at each other across 15 feet of cheap linoleum floor. And then the German Shepherd made a sound, a vocalization that was part bark, part cry, part whimper, a sound of pure, desperate recognition. The Thursday morning hearing felt like walking toward an execution. James dressed carefully in the suit David had loaned him, charcoal gray, slightly too big in the shoulders but presentable. He'd lost so much weight in the past weeks that even borrowed clothes hung loose. His reflection in the bathroom mirror startled him. A gaunt stranger with a shaved head and hollow eyes stared back, barely recognizable as the soldier who'd once stood proud in his dress uniform. Sargent sat at his feet while James tied his borrowed tie, the German Shepherd's brown eyes tracking every movement. The dog hadn't left his side since the confrontation with Adam 3 days ago, as if sensing that something important was about to happen, something that might separate them again. "It's going to be okay, Sarge," James whispered, though he wasn't sure he believed it. "Whatever happens, I'll make sure you're taken care of." Sargent's tail thumped once against the floor, but his eyes remained worried. Emma appeared in the doorway wearing her school uniform, a white polo shirt and navy blue skirt, though school wouldn't start for another hour. Maria had arranged for her to leave early so she could attend the hearing. The 6-year-old had insisted, and after some discussion, her parents had agreed. "You look nice, Mr. James," Emma said solemnly. "Like a real soldier." James managed a smile. "Thank you, Emma. You look very grown up today." "That's because today is important." She walked over and took his hand, her small palm barely covering half of his. "Don't worry. We're going to tell the judge the truth. And the truth is that you and Sargent belong together." The simple faith in her voice made James's throat tight. "I hope you're right, sweetheart." The courthouse was an imposing brick building in downtown Marietta, all columns and marble steps that seemed designed to make people feel small. James's hands shook as they climbed those steps, partly from nerves, partly from the weakness that had become his constant companion since starting chemotherapy. Adam was already there, standing with his lawyer in the hallway outside the courtroom. He was dressed impeccably in a navy suit and red tie, looking every inch the successful professional. When he saw James, something flickered across his face, relief, guilt, determination, all mixed together. "James," he said, taking a step forward, "you look better. The Rodriguez family has been good to you." "No thanks to you," James replied coldly. Sargent pressed against his leg, a low rumble in his chest. Adam's lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in her 40s, stepped forward. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm Catherine Brennan. I've been hired by your brother to represent his interests in this guardianship petition. I want you to know that everything we're doing is in your best interest." "My best interest would have been leaving me alone," James said. "Your best interest is getting treatment and having a stable living situation," Adam interjected. "James, please, can we talk? Just for a minute before we go in?" James looked at Maria and David, who both nodded encouragingly. With reluctance, he followed Adam to a quieter corner of the hallway, Sargent at his heels. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Two brothers who'd once been close now separated by years of pain and mistakes. "I know you hate me," Adam started. "I don't hate you, Adam. I just can't forgive you." "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to help. By taking away my choices, that's not help." Adam's face twisted with frustration. "You were dying in that shelter. What choice was that?" "It was mine. My life. My dog. My choice." "You sound like Dad." The words burst out of Adam, sharp and bitter. "Stubborn to the end. Refused help even when he needed it." James froze. "Don't talk about him." "Why not?" "He's dead because he wouldn't let anyone help. Heart attack, alone in his apartment, because he was too proud. Adam's voice broke. And I killed him. Maybe not directly, but after the DUI, after what I did to you, he stopped talking to me. The stress, the shame of having a son who nearly killed his other son. His heart attack 3 months later wasn't a coincidence. James felt the ground shift beneath him. Dad's dead? You didn't know? Adam's eyes widened. I tried to tell you. I called, I left messages. I changed my number, James shouted, not caring who heard. I changed my number because I couldn't stand hearing you apologize anymore. People in the hallway turned to stare. Sergeant barked once, sharp and commanding, and both brothers fell silent. Dad died 6 months ago, Adam said quietly. I tried to find you for the funeral. You were already gone. Living on the streets. I couldn't lose you too, James. Not like I lost him. James leaned against the wall, feeling like all the air had been knocked from his lungs. Their father, stern, proud, military through and through, was gone, and he'd never gotten to say goodbye. The accident wasn't just my fault, Adam continued, his voice trembling. You grabbed the wheel that night. Do you remember? James looked up sharply. I was drunk, swerving into oncoming traffic. You saw the headlights. You grabbed the wheel and jerked us right. You took the impact on your side. You saved my life, James. And I've let you think for 2 years that it was all my fault, that you were just a passenger. The memory came back in fragments. Adam's pickup truck, the smell of alcohol, the terrifying moment of seeing headlights bearing down, his hands reaching for the wheel, the crunch of metal and glass. Why tell me now? James asked hoarsely. Because you're about to fight for your life, and you need to know, you're a fighter. You always have been, even for someone as worthless as me. Before James could respond, David appeared. Guys, the judge is ready. We need to go in. The courtroom was smaller than James had expected, paneled in dark wood with rows of benches and an American flag in the corner. Judge Patricia Hendricks presided from an elevated bench, a black woman in her 50s with kind but no-nonsense eyes behind reading glasses. Adam's lawyer presented first, laying out the case with clinical efficiency. James's cancer diagnosis, his homelessness, Sargent's near death as evidence of James's inability to provide care. She painted a picture of a sick, desperate man who needed someone to make decisions for him. Then David's friend, a pro bono lawyer named Marcus Webb, stood to present the counter-argument. He submitted documentation: the Rodriguez family's address as James's current residence, the VA treatment plan that had been approved, Sargent's recovery under proper care, the GoFundMe that had raised over $47,000. Your Honor, Marcus said, Mr. Mitchell's situation was a temporary crisis, not a permanent state. He is currently housed with a supportive family, has an approved treatment plan, and is demonstrating every indication of recovery. Guardianship is unnecessary when a proper support system is in place. Judge Hendricks looked over her glasses at James. Mr. Mitchell, would you like to address the court? James stood, his legs unsteady. Sargent rose with him, and to everyone's surprise, the judge didn't object to the German Shepherd's presence. Your Honor, I served my country for 10 years. I made decisions that saved lives and cost lives. I've been trained to handle pressure and impossible situations. His voice grew stronger as he spoke. When I got sick, I made a choice. It was a hard choice, probably the hardest of my life. I thought leaving Sargent where someone might find him and give him a better life was the right thing to do. He looked down at the dog, who gazed back with complete trust. I was wrong, but it was my choice to make. My brother— He glanced at Adam, who sat rigid in his seat. My brother means well. He's carrying guilt that's eating him alive, and he thinks controlling my life will somehow make up for past mistakes. But I don't need a guardian. I need what everyone needs. Family. And I'm finding that." He gestured to the Rodriguez family sitting in the front row. Maria, with tears in her eyes, David with his arm around Emma, the little girl, watching intently. "They took me in when they didn't have to. They're helping me get treatment. They're teaching my dog that it's okay to trust again. That's not something a court order can mandate. That's something that happens when people choose to care." Judge Hendricks turned to Adam. "Mr. Mitchell, why guardianship? Why not simply help your brother as family should?" Adam stood slowly. His lawyer whispered urgently, but he ignored her. "Your Honor, my brother is right. This isn't about him. It's about me." His voice cracked. "My guilt. My need to control something because I'm terrified of losing someone else I love. I caused the accident that ended his military career. I drove drunk and nearly killed us both. And then our father died. And I convinced myself it was my fault too. The stress I caused. The shame." He looked at James. "I've been living with this guilt for 2 years, and it's been destroying me. I thought, if I could save my brother, if I could control his life and make him better, then maybe I could forgive myself, but that's not fair to him." Judge Hendricks waited, saying nothing. "I withdraw the petition," Adam said. "Your Honor, I formally withdraw the guardianship petition. My brother doesn't need a guardian. He needs a brother, and I need to learn how to be one again without trying to control everything." The courtroom was silent for a long moment. Even Adam's lawyer looked stunned. Judge Hendricks removed her glasses and cleaned them slowly, clearly considering her words. "Mr. Mitchell, Adam Mitchell, that took courage. Real courage isn't fighting. It's knowing when to let go." She looked at James. "And you, James Mitchell. You're right that you need family, not a guardian. But you also need to accept help when it's offered with genuine love, not control." She shuffled the papers before her. "Petition withdrawn. Case dismissed." The gavel came down with a decisive crack. Emma cheered, inappropriate but heartfelt, and the judge smiled at her. "Young lady, I assume you're Emma Rodriguez?" Emma stood up, suddenly shy. "Yes, ma'am. I've read about you." "You found this gentleman's German shepherd?" "Yes, ma'am. He was under a tree and he bowed to me. He asked me for help." "And did you help him?" "I promised I would. And I kept my promise." Judge Hendricks' expression softened. "You're a remarkable young lady. The world needs more people who keep their promises." She looked around the courtroom. "This case is concluded, but I want to say something off the record." Everyone waited. "I see a lot of broken families in this courtroom, people fighting over money, property, custody. But what I see here is a family trying to put itself back together. That's rare. That's precious." She looked at James and Adam. "Don't waste this chance. Whatever happened in the past, you have an opportunity now. Take it." In the hallway afterward, Adam approached James hesitantly. Can we talk?" "Really talk?" James looked at his brother, at the premature gray in his hair, the lines around his eyes, the weight of guilt he'd been carrying. He thought about their father, gone without James even knowing. He thought about the accident and the truth he'd just learned about grabbing the wheel. He thought about Sargent, who'd forgiven him for a betrayal far worse than anything Adam had done. "Yeah," James said finally, "we can talk. Not today. I need time, but yeah, we'll talk." Adam's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. That's all I'm asking." As they walked out of the courthouse into the bright Georgia sunshine, Emma slipped her hand into James's. Sargent walked on his other side, tail wagging for the first time in days. "See?" Emma said. "I told you the truth would work." James looked down at her. this tiny warrior who'd saved both him and his dog with nothing but compassion and determination. "You were right," he said. "You were absolutely right." James Mitchell's knees gave out. He collapsed to the floor right there in the shelter lobby, and the German shepherd lunged forward with a strength that surprised everyone. Emma lost her grip on the collar as 75 pounds of desperate dog crossed the distance in 3 bounds. Sargent hit James with enough force to knock him backward, front paws on his chest, tongue frantically licking his face, whimpering and crying in a way that sounded almost human. James wrapped his arms around the dog's neck and sobbed, deep, racking sobs that shook his entire body. "Sarge," he gasped between tears. "Oh, God, Sarge, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, buddy." The dog pressed closer, as if trying to crawl inside James's skin, making sounds Emma had never heard a dog make, sounds of grief and relief and joy all tangled together. "I thought you were dead," James cried into the dog's fur. "I thought I'd killed you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Maria had tears streaming down her face. David pulled Emma close, and even the shelter volunteer was crying, clutching tissues from the box on her desk. They stayed like that for several minutes, man and dog locked together on the floor, both of them shaking, both of them crying. Finally, James looked up and his eyes found Emma's. "You?" he said, his voice raw. "You found him?" Emma nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "Where?" "Under a tree near our house," Emma managed. "He was lying there, and he bowed to me. He asked me for help." James's face crumpled again. "He bowed. Sarge doesn't bow. He never begs. They trained that out of him in the military." He looked at his dog with wonder and heartbreak. "You must have been so desperate, boy. I'm so sorry. I thought you'd be better off without me." "Mr. Mitchell," Maria said gently, stepping forward. "I'm Maria Rodriguez. This is my husband David and our daughter Emma. We need to talk about what happens next." James struggled to his feet. Sargent pressed against his legs, refusing to let any distance come between them. "I can't take him back," he said immediately, his voice breaking on every word. "I can't afford to feed him. I can't afford a place that allows dogs. I can't even afford to feed myself half the time." "We know about your situation," David said carefully. "The shelter told us you've been sick," James laughed bitterly. "Sick, that's one word for it. Stage 3 lung cancer. They wanted me to start treatment 6 months ago, but I couldn't afford it and take care of Sarge. So I tried to find him a home." He looked down at the dog. "There's a family in Roswell. Nice people, big fenced yard. I left him there, told myself they'd take him in." "Roswell," David said. "That's 20 miles from where we found him." James's eyes widened. 20 miles. He traveled. He looked at Sargent with a mixture of pride and devastation. "You were looking for me. All this time you were looking for me." Sargent's tail wagged weakly, and he pressed his nose into James's hand. "Mr. Mitchell," Emma said, her voice small but determined. "Sargent needs a doctor. He's really sick. He needs food and medicine, and his hip hurts." "I know," James said, fresh tears falling. "I know he does, and I can't give him any of that. That's why I had to let him go." "What if you didn't have to choose?" Maria said, suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her, including David, who clearly had no idea what his wife was about to propose. "What if there was another way?" James shook his head. "There isn't. Trust me, I've looked at every option. I'm dying. I live in a shelter. I have $23 to my name. There's no version of this where I can take care of him." "But what if you didn't have to do it alone?" Maria continued. "What if you had help? A place to stay while you start treatment? People to help with Sargent's care?" "Maria," David said quietly, "can we talk privately for a moment?" But Emma spoke up before her parents could leave. "We could help. We have a guest room, and Sargent already likes our house." James looked at this family, Strangers who had found his dog, tracked him down, and were now offering something he couldn't accept. "I can't ask you to do that. You don't even know me." "You're right," Maria said. "We don't know you, but we know Sargent. And more importantly, our daughter knows Sargent. She made him a promise." She looked at Emma. "Tell him what you told the dog last night." Emma stepped closer to James, her small voice steady. "I told him I would help him. I told him I'd find you or find him somewhere safe. I promised. And my parents taught me that promises matter." James looked at this tiny girl who couldn't weigh more than 50 pounds, who had somehow convinced a military dog to break every rule he'd been taught, who had kept her word when it would have been easier to call animal control. "I can't accept charity," James said, but his voice wavered. "It's not charity," David said, finally understanding what his wife was proposing and making his peace with it. Call it a temporary arrangement. You stay with us, we help you get into treatment, you get stable, you get better, and then you and Sargent figure out your next steps together." "And if I don't get better?" James asked quietly. "Cancer doesn't always work out the way we hope." "Then we deal with that when we come to it," Maria said. "But right now you have a dog who just traveled 20 miles to find you, and you have a little girl who kept her promise. The least you can do is try." James looked down at Sargent, who looked back with those intelligent brown eyes that had seen him through 3 tours in Afghanistan, through injuries and explosions in the darkest moments of his life. "What do you think, Sarge?" he whispered. "Should we try?" The German shepherd's tail wagged, and he pressed closer to his person's leg. James looked back at the Rodriguez family, at Maria with her fierce compassion, at David with his quiet strength, at Emma with her unshakable faith that promises mattered. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, we'll try." The first 3 days in the Rodriguez household passed in a careful dance of adjustment. James took the guest room on the first floor, a small space with a twin bed and a window overlooking the backyard. Sargent refused to sleep anywhere else, positioning himself on the floor beside the bed, his body blocking the door as if guarding against threats only he could sense. Emma visited them constantly, bringing books to read aloud, drawings she'd made of Sargent, and endless questions about James's time in the army. James answered what he could, editing the worst parts for a 6-year-old's ears, and found himself smiling more than he had in months. Maria took charge of both patients with the efficiency of a woman who'd spent 15 years in emergency nursing. She scheduled appointments, Dr. Morrison for Sargent on Tuesday, the VA oncologist for James on Thursday. She created meal plans to help James gain weight and monitored Sargent's food intake to ensure he didn't eat too fast and make himself sick. David handled the logistics quietly, as was his nature. He cleared space in the garage for Sargent's supplies, set up a payment plan with Dr. Morrison, and spent his evenings researching veteran support services and cancer treatment programs. But on Tuesday evening, everything shifted. James was in the backyard with Sargent, watching the dog move slowly across the grass, testing his sore hip. The veterinary visit that afternoon had confirmed what they'd feared: severe malnutrition, dehydration, arthritis in the hips, and an old injury that had never properly healed. Dr. Morrison had given them medications, a strict diet plan, and a bill that made James's stomach turn, even though the Rodriguez family insisted on handling it. He was so lost in guilt that he didn't hear the car pull into the driveway. Didn't hear the front door open and close, didn't hear the footsteps coming through the house, but Sargent heard. His ears perked forward, his body went rigid, and a low growl rumbled in his chest, a sound James hadn't heard since Afghanistan. "Sarge?" James turned to see what had triggered the response, and then he saw him, standing in the doorway to the backyard, dressed in business-casual clothes that looked expensive and out of place, was a man James hadn't seen in 2 years. Adam Mitchell. James's entire body went cold. "What are you doing here?" Adam held up his hands, palms out. "I just want to talk." "How did you even find me?" The shelter worker posted a photo on Facebook. The reunion. It went viral. Thousands of shares. Someone tagged me in the comments, said, "Isn't this your brother?" Sergeant's growl deepened, and he positioned himself between the two men. James put his hand on the dog's head, a gesture that meant, "Alert, but don't attack." "You need to leave," James said, his voice hard. "James, please. I've been trying to reach you for months. I've called, I've gone to the VA, I don't want to hear it, Adam." Inside the house, Maria heard the commotion and looked out the kitchen window. She saw the tension, saw Sergeant's aggressive posture, and immediately called for David. Adam took a step forward and Sergeant barked, a sharp, commanding sound that made Adam freeze. "That's your welcome from Sarge," James said bitterly. "He remembers you. He remembers what you did. It was an accident. I've apologized 1,000 times. You were drunk." James's voice rose, months of suppressed rage finally breaking free. "You were drunk, and you insisted on driving, and you crashed into that telephone pole going 60 miles an hour. I lost my career. I lost everything." "I know. Don't you think I know that? Don't you think I live with that every single day?" "Then why are you here?" "Because you're dying." Adam's voice cracked. "Because I heard you have cancer and you're homeless and I can't—" He stopped, composing himself. "I can't lose you too." "Two? What do you mean, two?" Adam's face crumpled. Dad had a heart attack 3 months after my DUI. Did you know that? The stress, the shame I brought on the family, it killed him, James. And then you stopped returning my calls and I thought I'd lose you too." James felt the ground shift beneath him. "Dad's dead? You didn't know. I tried to tell you. I called. I left messages. I changed my number," James shouted. "I changed my number because I couldn't stand hearing you apologize anymore." The back door opened and David stepped out, followed by Maria. "Gentlemen, I think we need to take this inside and talk calmly." "Who are you?" Adam demanded. "David Rodriguez. This is my house. My family is currently hosting your brother, and I'd appreciate it if you'd lower your voice. My 6-year-old daughter is upstairs." Adam looked at David, then at Maria, then back at James. "You're staying with strangers?" "They're not strangers," James said quietly. "They're more family than you've been." That hit Adam like a physical blow. He took a step back, and for the first time, James saw how much his older brother had aged. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, gray at his temples, a thinness to his face that spoke of stress and sleepless nights. "Please," Adam said, and his voice was raw. "Please, just let me talk. Give me 5 minutes. If you still want me to leave after that, I will. I promise." Maria and David exchanged glances. Maria nodded slightly, and David gestured toward the patio furniture. "Everyone sit? I'll get some water." They sat at the outdoor table, James on one side with Sergeant pressed against his legs, Adam on the other, the Rodriguez couple between them like referees. Emma watched from her bedroom window upstairs, sensing something important was happening but not allowed to interrupt. Adam cleared his throat. "I know you don't want to hear this, but I need to say it anyway. The accident was my fault, all of it. And I've been living with that guilt for 2 years. He looked at his hands. "I joined AA. I've been sober for 19 months. I've been in therapy. I've been trying to become someone who deserves forgiveness." "I can't forgive you, Adam," James said flatly. "I'm not asking you to. Not yet. Maybe not ever." Adam looked up, meeting his brother's eyes. "But I am asking you to let me help. The GoFundMe that got set up after the reunion post went viral. It's at $47,000 now. That's enough for your treatment, James. That's enough to give you a real chance. James blinked. What GoFundMe? Maria pulled out her phone, showing him the page someone had created titled, Help Veteran James and His Loyal Dog Sergeant. The photo was the reunion shot. James on his knees, Sergeant in his arms, both of them crying. The description told their story, and beneath it were thousands of comments from strangers promising prayers, sending love, contributing money. I didn't authorize this, James whispered, scrolling through the messages. You don't have to, David said gently. People want to help. Your story touched them. Adam leaned forward. James, I know I can't undo the accident. I can't bring back your Army career or give you the last 2 years back. But I can do this. I can make sure you get treatment. I can pay for whatever the GoFundMe doesn't cover. Please, let me do this one thing. Why? James asked. Why now? Because Dad's gone, and you're all I have left. Because that dog of yours just traveled 20 miles to find you, and if he hasn't given up, then I can't either. Adam's voice broke. Because you're my brother, and I love you, and I can't watch you die knowing I didn't try everything to save you. The silence that followed was heavy with years of pain, anger, and grief. Sergeant, sensing the shift in emotional energy, relaxed slightly, though his eyes never left Adam. James looked at his brother, really looked at him, and saw not the drunk driver who'd destroyed his life, but the big brother who'd taught him to ride a bike, who'd defended him from bullies in middle school, who'd cried at the airport when James shipped out to Afghanistan. I can't promise I'll forgive you, James said finally. Not right away. I know. But I'll let you help. For now. We'll see how it goes. Adam's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. That's all I'm asking. Maria stood up. Then it's settled. James stays here. Treatment starts Thursday. Adam, you're welcome to visit, but you need to call first and respect boundaries. Can everyone agree to that? Both brothers nodded. Good, Maria said with the authority of someone used to managing difficult patients. Now, Adam, you can stay for dinner if you'd like. We're having chicken and rice, and there's plenty. Adam looked at James, waiting for permission. James hesitated, then gave a small nod. I'd like that, Adam said softly. Thank you. That night, after Adam left and James had gone to bed, Emma asked her mother the question that had been burning in her mind all evening. Mama, why was that man so sad? Maria pulled her daughter onto her lap. Because sometimes, when we hurt someone we love, even by accident, we can't forgive ourselves, and that makes us very, very sad. But Mr. James said he'd give him a chance. Doesn't that help? Yes, baby. That helps a lot. That's the first step. Emma thought about this, then looked out her window toward the guest room where Sergeant was surely keeping watch over James. Sergeant forgave Mr. James for leaving him, Emma said, even though it hurt. That's what love does, right? Maria hugged her daughter tight, amazed once again by the wisdom of children. Yes, sweetheart, that's exactly what love does. 3 weeks after James started chemotherapy, everything fell apart. It was a Friday evening. Emma was at a birthday party at her friend Sophie's house, delighted to be celebrating with classmates who'd all heard about the famous dog and wanted updates. David was picking her up in an hour. Maria was in the kitchen preparing dinner, chicken soup, one of the few things James could keep down now that the treatment side effects had kicked in with full force. In the living room, Adam sat across from James, both of them pretending to watch a baseball game neither cared about. These visits had become routine. Adam stopped by 3 times a week, sometimes bringing groceries, sometimes just sitting in awkward silence, both brothers slowly learning how to exist in the same space again. James had lost more weight despite Maria's best efforts. His face was gaunt, his skin had taken on a grayish pallor, and his hair had fallen out in clumps until he'd finally asked David to shave it all off. But he was fighting. Every appointment, every treatment, every medication, he showed up and endured. Sargent lay at his feet as always, the dog's health improving while his owner's declined. The hip medication had worked wonders, and Dr. Morrison's careful feeding plan had put 15 pounds back on the German Shepherd. But Sargent seemed to understand that James was sick. He never left his side, barely eating unless James ate first, whining softly whenever James showed signs of pain. Adam was mid-sentence about a potential job opportunity for James once he recovered when James suddenly gasped, his hand flying to his chest. "James?" Adam leaned forward. "What's wrong?" James tried to speak but couldn't catch his breath. His face contorted in pain, and he slumped sideways on the couch. "Maria!" Adam shouted, jumping to his feet. "Something's wrong!" Sargent was already barking, sharp, urgent barks that rang through the house like an alarm. Maria ran from the kitchen, took one look at James, and her nurse training kicked in immediately. "Call 911, she commanded, dropping to her knees beside the couch. "Now!" Adam fumbled for his phone, hands shaking so badly he could barely dial. Maria had James on the floor, checking his pulse, her fingers on his neck while she watched his chest. "James, can you hear me? Stay with me." James's eyes were open but unfocused. He was breathing, but each breath was shallow and labored. Sargent pressed close, whining frantically, trying to get to James, but Maria was in the way. "Possible cardiac event," Maria said, mostly to herself, running through her mental checklist. "Or pulmonary embolism. Could be a complication from the cancer or the treatment." She looked at Adam, who was speaking rapidly to the 911 operator. "Tell them we need an ambulance immediately." Patient is 34-year-old male, cancer patient undergoing chemotherapy, presenting with acute chest pain and respiratory distress. Adam relayed the information, his voice breaking. "They're coming. They said 8 minutes. 8 minutes felt like 8 hours. Maria monitored James's vital signs, speaking to him constantly, trying to keep him conscious and calm. Sargent paced and whined, his distress palpable. Adam stood frozen, watching his brother struggle for breath, feeling utterly helpless. When the paramedics arrived, they worked with swift efficiency, loading James onto a stretcher, starting an IV, fitting an oxygen mask over his face. Maria gave them James's medical history in the clipped professional tone of one medical professional to another, but her hands shook as she did. "I'm riding with him," she told Adam as they loaded James into the ambulance. "I'll follow in my car," Adam said. Then he looked at Sargent, who was trying to follow James into the ambulance, barking desperately. "What about the dog?" "David will be home with Emma in 30 minutes. Tell him to meet us at County Hospital, and for God's sake, don't let that dog see them take James away. It'll destroy him." Adam nodded and grabbed Sargent's collar as the ambulance doors closed. Sargent fought against the restraint, his claws scraping against the driveway as he tried to reach the vehicle. He watched the ambulance pull away, lights flashing, and let out a howl that made Adam's heart break. "I know, boy," Adam said, struggling to hold the powerful dog. "I know, but we can't follow. We have to wait." He managed to get Sargent back inside the house, but the dog refused to settle. He paced from window to window, whining, occasionally barking at the door. Adam called David, explained what happened, and then sat on the floor with Sargent, one hand on the dog's head. "He's going to be okay," Adam whispered, not sure if he was trying to convince the dog or himself. "He has to be okay." When David arrived home with Emma 20 minutes later, the little girl took one look at Sargent's distress and knew immediately something was wrong. "Where's Mr. James?" David knelt down to her level. "He got sick, Mija. Mom took him to the hospital." Emma's face crumpled. Is he going to die? We don't know yet, but the doctors are taking care of him. I want to see him. Not tonight, sweetheart, but tomorrow, if he's better, we'll go. I promise. They drove to the hospital, all three of them and Sargent, because leaving the dog at home alone seemed cruel. In the hospital parking lot, Emma and Sargent waited in the car while David went inside to get updates. The waiting room was stark and fluorescent lit. Maria sat with Adam, both of them silent, both checking their phones obsessively. When David appeared, Maria stood immediately. How is he? The same. They're running tests. Emma's in the car with the dog. She's really scared, David. Maria closed her eyes. I know. I am too. A doctor emerged from the emergency department. Dr. Patel, James's oncologist, whom the ER had called in for consultation. Family of James Mitchell? All three of them stood. We're the closest thing he has to family, Maria said. How is he? Dr. Patel's expression was grave. He's stable for now. But I need to be honest with you. The arrhythmia, the irregular heartbeat, was triggered by tumor pressure on his heart. We knew the cancer was aggressive, but the latest scans show it's progressed faster than we anticipated. What does that mean? Adam's voice was barely a whisper. It means we're looking at stage 4 now. The cancer has metastasized to his heart and lungs. Without aggressive treatment, Mr. Mitchell has perhaps weeks left. A month at most. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. And with treatment? Maria asked, though her nurse's experience told her the answer would be grim. With the newest immunotherapy protocols, we might extend that to 6 months, possibly a year. But there are no guarantees, and the treatment itself is brutal. Quality of life becomes a serious consideration. Adam made a sound like he'd been punched. David put a hand on his shoulder. Can we see him? Maria asked. Briefly. He's asking for his dog. His dog? He keeps asking if someone's taking care of Sargent. It seems to be causing him more distress than his own condition. Maria exchanged looks with David. The dog is in our car. Can we bring him in? Just for a few minutes? Dr. Patel hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. ICU rules don't technically allow it, but given the circumstances. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. They brought Sargent in through a side entrance, Emma holding his leash. The German Shepherd seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. He walked calmly, quietly, his training overriding his anxiety. The ICU room was all beeping machines and harsh lights. James lay in the bed, pale as the sheets, oxygen tubes in his nose, IV lines in both arms. His eyes were closed, but they opened when he heard the click of dog claws on linoleum. Sarge? His voice was weak, muffled by the oxygen. Sargent approached the bed slowly, and this time his movements were gentle, careful. He placed his head on the mattress near James's hand, making soft, whimpering sounds. James's fingers moved weakly to touch the dog's head. Hey, buddy, I'm okay. Don't worry. But everyone in the room knew he wasn't okay. Emma stepped forward, her small face streaked with tears. Mr. James, you have to fight. You have to get better. James looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. Emma, sweetheart, I need you to understand something. Sometimes people don't get better. Sometimes they try really hard, and it still doesn't work out. No, Emma said firmly. You promised. You said you'd try. I am trying. Then try harder. Her voice rose, childlike grief overwhelming her composure. Sargent didn't give up. He walked 20 miles to find you. You can't give up on him. Adam, who had been standing back, suddenly stepped forward. She's right. You can't give up, James. You can't. Adam, no, listen to me. When Dad died, I gave up. I drowned in guilt and alcohol, and I gave up on everything, including you. and I've regretted it every day since." Adam's voice cracked. "You're better than me. You're stronger than me. If you give up now, what does that say? What does that tell everyone who's rooting for you?" James looked at his brother, really looked at him, and saw not the man who'd driven drunk and destroyed his career, but the boy who'd held his hand on the first day of kindergarten, who'd taught him how to throw a baseball, who'd written him letters every week during his first deployment. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," James whispered. "You don't have to be strong alone," Maria said, stepping forward. "That's what we've been trying to tell you. You have us. You have Adam. You have Emma. You have that stubborn dog who refuses to leave your side." Sergeant whined softly, as if agreeing. "The new treatment Dr. Patel mentioned," David added. "It's expensive, but the GoFundMe is up to $62,000 now. Adam's offered to cover the rest. You have the resources. You have the support. All you need is the will to fight." James closed his eyes, tears sliding down his temples into his hair. His hand tightened slightly on Sergeant's fur. The dog pressed closer, solid and warm and alive. When James opened his eyes again, there was something different in them. Not hope exactly, but determination. The same look he'd had when he'd enlisted at 20 years old, when he'd volunteered for K-9 training, when he'd gone on his third tour, even though he could have stayed stateside. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay, I'll fight. Whatever it takes." Emma smiled through her tears. Adam covered his face with his hands, shoulders shaking with relief. Maria squeezed David's hand so hard it hurt, and Sergeant's tail wagged just once, but enough. Dr. Patel, who had been watching from the doorway, stepped inside. "Then we start the new protocol Monday. It's going to be rough, James. Rougher than anything you've experienced." "I've been through 3 tours in Afghanistan," James said, his voice still weak but steady. "I can handle rough. With one difference, Doctor," Patel said, looking around the room at the faces surrounding the hospital bed. "This time, you won't be fighting alone." Sometimes the greatest lessons come from the smallest teachers. When Emma found that broken soldier, a dog who had served his country with honor, kneeling in surrender beneath an oak tree, she didn't see his scars or his weaknesses. She saw a promise that needed keeping. And isn't that what we've forgotten in our rush through life? That loyalty isn't convenient, that love demands sacrifice, and that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the stranger whose pain calls to something deep inside us. James Mitchell had every reason to give up. His brother's mistake had cost him his career. Cancer was stealing his future. But a 6-year-old girl and an aging German shepherd reminded him that surrender isn't the same as defeat. They showed him that asking for help isn't weakness. It's the bravest choice we can make. In our twilight years, when life has taught us both joy and heartbreak, we understand this truth. The connections we forge in our darkest moments become the light that guides us home. Have you ever been someone's lifeline when they'd given up hope? Or has a stranger's kindness saved you when you needed it most? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone needs to hear today.